We analysed more than 600,000 FPL draft team names this season, and what we found was pretty unimpressive, really. The fifth most popular team name was simply Test. The most popular is simply the name of a current Premier League club. Very creative of you. And somewhere in the middle of all that, 1,374 of you independently arrived at the same chocolate bar-based pun, all probably very smug with your unique idea. This is the state of us. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another one of our Brain Rot International Break episodes. And in this one, we are attempting to answer the question, what does your draft team name say about you? Because, as I say, we've done something that, as far as I know, certainly not in the draft FPL space, no one has probably done before. We've pulled every single team name in existence at the moment for FPL Draft, which is currently, if you want to know the exact number, 637,467 of them. We've gone through all that data to try and find out what draft managers actually call their teams and whether this has any bearing on league performance. So there'll be another pod with no waiver picks, no fixture analysis, no hold or drop verdicts. That will be coming soon enough. This is just another bit of international break fun to see if we can highlight some interesting tidbits. So we looked at every team, every league. There are trends, couple of surprises in there, a bit of controversy too. And we find the new player to the Premier League whose name has basically single-handedly funded an entire pun economy. Let's get straight into it. So where better to start than by looking at the most popular names, the names that come up again and again. So the single most popular team name in FPL Draft this season, nearly 2,000 of them, is simply Liverpool. So that's it. Around 2,000 FPL Draft managers got to the team name screen in the summer, typed the name of their actual football club, and considered the job done. These are people who are about to spend the next 9 months obsessing over expected goals, fixture difficulty ratings, defensive contribution thresholds, and when it came to the one creative decision that was entirely their own, they simply wrote Liverpool and moved on with their lives. Tremendous. Third on the list, in the same vein, Arsenal. Just under 1,300 entries for that one. So the top three most popular team names in FPL Draft are Liverpool, pun that we'll get into in a second, and then Arsenal. So two of the three most popular names are just clubs. I'll let that sink in. But here's the one that really got to me. Fifth on the list, more popular even than Chelsea, more popular than Saka Potatoes, more popular than Manchester United, surprisingly, is simply Test. More than 1,000 draft FPL managers named their FPL draft team Test, not even as a joke, just Test. They opened the app, got the name screen, typed Test to see if it works, and apparently never went back. These people are in live competitive draft leagues. Someone drafted against them. Someone has Test in their league and is probably losing to them at the moment. Now we get to the puns, and king of the puns this year is the one sitting in second place with just over 1,300 identical entries, is Kinder Mbumo, which for those of you who may have different confectionery and chocolate bars in your countries and regions, this is a play on the words for the chocolate bar, a Kinder Bueno, which is obviously playing off the pun with a different pronunciation because Mbumo is pronounced Mbumo. It's not Mbuemo, and a Kinder Bueno is pronounced that way, Bueno. So those two words do not sound alike. This is a pun really only works in passing if you're reading it with your eyes and not saying it out loud. So I'll call it a visual pun masquerading as a wordplay pun and say nearly 1,400 managers out there have built their entire team identity around it, and then presumably felt quite pleased with themselves about it. Not for me. That's a hard F grade for me in the team naming ranks. Further down, over 1,000 entries, we have got Vert's case scenario. That's fine. That one actually works. We've got sack of potatoes on there, beef shirky, Acuna Mateta, a couple of familiar highlights further down include rice baby, which are also allowed. Under my kukurea, also good. Chicken tikka masala, there are actually a few variants of that. It's hard to, when we're dealing with this much data, it's hard to really dredge all of the themes out that we want to. But I think there's probably some other iterations of that, which if we'd have included them together would have bumped this up the list. But still, chicken tikka masala, all one word due to the character limit, also fair in my books. The stat that redeems the whole thing, though, overall, is that out of the 637,000 names that are out there, over 400,000 of those names are completely unique, one of a kind, never used by anyone else in any other league. 64%, that is, of all team names are genuinely original. It's just that the unoriginal minority seem to shout the loudest because there are, as I said, nearly 1,400 of them making the same naff chocolate bar pun, which technically doesn't even work. So if we break this down into categories, so we tried to come up with some sort of classification system to make sense of it all, came up with 7. And like I said a second ago, it's difficult to really, obviously we used a bit of AI to help us come up with this. It's difficult to really come up with the categories. The dominant one, though, is that original one whereby it's difficult to track exactly where it comes from. I imagine the majority of these, are either inside jokes, niche references, or kind of puns which aren't obviously screaming the name of the player in them, which means that our system didn't pick them up. Then you've got custom FC names. So for example, popular variants of this, we've got Mandem FC, Dream United, Goat FC. That's about 1 in 8 teams fall into that category. Obvious player puns with the player name clearly in there is about 10%. And then you've got the other fandom entries, such as You'll Never Walk Alone, Gooners, Red Devils. So these are very much playing off a team name without actually just writing Liverpool or Arsenal. And then you've got the red bar, which we'll come on to later. It just says change name. Nearly 14,000 entries are called change name, which is just over 2% of the total. That's the category where FPL's own system has decided that the name was too offensive and has then replaced it with change name. And I say we'll come back to that one in detail because the breakdown by league tier is interesting. Now, in terms of the player pun leaderboard, what we're able to do is try and work out which player names seemed to spark the most interest in creating a team name pun out of them. And for those watching, I'll obviously unpack this for those listening, but for those watching, you'll see straight away there is one player head and shoulders above everyone else, and that is Florian Wirtz, with nearly 7,500 team names devoted to some play on his name, the undisputed king of the FPL Draft team names, and it isn't remotely close. He's nearly double the next player on the list, which is Saka. And it's fairly obvious why. I mean, Wirtz sounds like worst, and coming up with a team name, and it seems coming up with a team name does indeed seem to bring out the worst in many of you. We've got Wirtz case scenario, Wirtz nightmare, Lil Uzi Wirtz, your Wirtz nightmare, could be Wirtz. The man arrived from the Bundesliga and within months has, as I said at the beginning, funded an entire naming economy purely by having a punnable surname. So congrats to Wirtz, who's at least done something there more than what we expected him to actually do on the pitch. Second, as I just said, is Saka, nearly 4,000 entries, very food heavy. Lots of Saka potatoes in there. Major League Saka, Saka Spuds, Pro Evolution Saka. Quite like those, they're pretty good. Third is Arne Slot. Interesting, because obviously not a player. We have got a couple of managers on the list. Slot Machine is the main one there. Very creative of you. A lot of Liverpool fans clearly fancied themselves as linguists. Then Salah at just over 3,002. Essentially mostly some variation of chicken tikka masala. And Mbumo not far behind, but we've established the majority of those are probably ineligible in my book. There's quite a long tail of names elsewhere. Cole Palmer, Eze, we've got Eze does it, presumably doing much of the heavy lifting for Eze there. Cunha and Mateta both in the mix, which gives rise to Hakunya Mateta, a team name that we will see in the next bonus pod very, very soon. And Thomas Frank with Thomas the Frank engine doing the heavy lifting there with just over 1,700 entries. The ex Spurs manager getting more pun references than Rice, Isak or Haaland, although Haaland's, I guess, fairly difficult to do something with. So let's have a look at club loyalty. So obviously when you sign up for FPL, you probably remember right at the beginning, it asks you which team you support, which team you follow, which we can then link between. So we can kind of link between your supposed club loyalty with the name that you chose to use. So there are 31,000 team names, which to some degree reference their club, whether that's just by directly calling yourself Arsenal or by maybe calling it some variant like Gooners or the Gunners or something like that. And Arsenal topped the charts, over 9,000 clear references from Arsenal fans to Arsenal. These are managers who, faced with a blank text box and the full creative freedom of the English language, decided the most useful thing they could communicate was which Premier League club they support. Information that in all likelihood in your draft league, the other managers probably know full well which club you support. But there you go. Liverpool second with just over 5,000, which combined with the fact that, say, nearly half of those simply type Liverpool, is pretty damning for those lot. And then Chelsea, United, Spurs rounding out the top 5. Then down at 7th, interestingly, City, just 955, fewer than Everton. After 15 years of domestic dominance, City fans are still being outnamed by Everton fans. Now, that could be because City are simply a smaller traditional fan base than Everton, or that City fans have slightly more imagination. I'll let you lot decide. If you enjoy our content, do consider clicking the subscribe button below or giving us a thumbs up. If you're listening, then follow on whichever platform you're on. If you've never signed up at Draft FC before, go to draftfc.co.uk and all new members will get a 1-month free trial. So next we then had a look at whether league quality, which is if you're not familiar with what I mean by league quality, go and have a look at the previous episode, whether that has any bearing on the creativity of the team names. Now, you might expect the best leagues to have the most original team names, the most engaged managers putting the most thought into it. But actually, the creativity percentages are remarkably flat across all 4 tiers. The strong tier, the sort of 10 to 25% bracket, scores highest on creativity. And then the tier below is the lowest, at about 74%. So all pretty tightly clustered. Everyone's roughly as likely to come up with something original. The difference is what the unoriginal names actually look like. So then if we have a look at some of the particular names that come up again and again, we can see that for the elite leagues, so those top 10% of draft leagues, the top names all tend to be player wordplay. Kinder and Mbumo, Verts Case Scenario, Sack of Potatoes, Beef Shirky, all of those that we've already mentioned are very high up on the elite list, and that is pretty much the same for the strong category as well. If we go down to the bottom tier of leagues, so the mid and the casual leagues down at the bottom, you'll see that the spread is a lot more made up of those very basic team names. Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. The top 5 is simply just Premier League team names. In mid-league, it's almost identical. Liverpool heads it with nearly 1,000 entries just within that tier alone. So there's clearly a direct correlation between how engaged someone is with the fantasy game and how much thought they've actually put in to what they're going to call their team. Now, that brings us onto the change name rate, which, the one I find the most revealing, actually. If you've ever encountered a team called change name, then as I said earlier, that will almost certainly be because FPL deemed the original name too offensive. And they do that. They've got their own kind of automatic screening system, which must pick out certain keywords and phrases. So it's obviously there are, if you think about the main FPL game too, there are millions of entries, so they can't have one bloke going through them all and working out which are offensive or not. And then they just put in a placeholder, which is change name. So the rate at which FPL resets team names for being offensive does vary quite significantly by league tier. And the casual leagues are the lowest, which is probably because they're all just calling their teams Liverpool, at around 1%. The highest is the strong tier. So that's the kind of 10 to 25% bracket. So these are pretty competitive leagues, not quite the best, but certainly by no means the worst. And they've got a rate of having changed name in the league of just under 3.5%, which is nearly triple the rate in the casual leagues. So the most competitive, but not quite elite managers are the ones who seem to be pushing the naming boundaries the hardest. They're engaged enough to try something edgy, clearly have opinions, but apparently haven't quite developed the restraint of the very top tier, which is probably why, from an actual FPL draft point of view, they are falling short. The total number of teams which have changed name as the name is, say, just over 4,000 managers across the whole data set. Now, like I said, we don't know exactly what those names were. We'll never know that. That information isn't saved. But the fact that names like Diddy Party made it through the filter and are actually just into the top 30 most common names suggests that the system isn't catching maybe everything that it should be. If you had a team name that was banned, maybe you feel unjustly banned, then do comment below and let the comments decide whether it's fair or not. So the key takeaways from over 600,000 team names: Florian Wirtz is the naming pun king. Test is the 5th most popular name in FPL Draft, which is damning indictment of a significant portion of this community. 70% are genuinely original, which is good. The creativity is real. Better leagues mean more player puns. Worse leagues mean more Premier League club names as your name. And the strong tier is simultaneously the most creative and the most likely to get their name wiped by FPL, which does feel about right. You'll be able to see all this in the blog section at draftfc.co.uk if you prefer to look in written form with all the charts and all the breakdowns. As already mentioned, you can sign up for free if you want access to all the stats in the background with a 1-month free trial if you've never been before. If this is your first time at the channel, then consider giving us your subscription by clicking that button below. Give us a thumbs up and do comment any of your draft conundrums ready for the Q&A section in the upcoming Game Week 32 preview pod. Thank you for listening. There will be one more in the international break brain rot series coming up before the Game Week 32 preview, so stay tuned for that. But until then, stay sure.